Hey guys, as I've teased a gajillion times, I've got Miss Becky Massey in the room with me. We're going to talk about these 4 ballot items. We're going to get a general understanding of what yes and no actually means when you go to vote on November 8th. Go to the... oh, wow. Blanked out there a second. AlmostAnAgreement.com. Check out my Election Guide 22. It's got the interviews I've done so far. I'll have a link to this show on there as well. And there's links to KGIS and Knox County Election Commission as far as getting... making sure you're registered and stuff, because that runs out here in a couple weeks as well. I think it's October 10th, something like that. Becky will double check it for us here in just a second, and we'll go from there. But registration's running out soon. Figure out your polling location, all that kind of stuff. All that's available on our website. That's Election Guide 22. Go to your favorite podcast provider, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. Give us a like, share, friend, follow, tell all your friends about us, all that kind of cool stuff. We're going to keep doing what we do, and we're going to learn more about what these actual ballot items will actually do when they take effect after the election. So we'll go from there, and we'll talk some more about it. All right, Becky Massey, everybody. She is my state senator for District 6 here in Knox County. Had her on a few times for a few different things here and there. One of the more requested ones was... last summer, you and I did a session review show and had a lot of people that told me that they really liked that one, and we'll have to maybe do that again next summer because we're a little too late for this last session's run through. So we're here for ballot items. You're not in the election this time. That's part of the reason why I wanted to come to you with it instead of going to some of the people that are either running to keep their seat or even running for the new seat. So somebody that's got a little bit more distance from what's going on. So we have 4 ballot items. And we talked pre-show that I was thinking it'd make more sense to go backwards. Go ahead.
Why don't I talk about how something gets to be a constitutional amendment, how the process works?
I know the answer to this because you taught me about it.
Okay. So if someone proposes a constitutional amendment that they would like the citizens of Tennessee to vote on, it has to pass through 1 2-year General Assembly by a simple majority. Then the next 2-year cycle, it has to pass by a 2/3 majority. And then at that point, it would go on the ballot the next time the governor's on the ballot. So it can take, it can take as quick as 2 years or 3 years, I guess, but it can be a 5 or 6 year process.
And I think that is an important piece of data, especially when we get to number 1, because I think, at least in my understanding of it, and you'll help correct me on it, I think that part as far as how long the process takes, which I think is important, since it's a ballot item, it takes a little more work to get there. But I think especially for some of the timing things, and I think, to me, my understanding of number 1 is it's more about timing than specifically changing things. But we'll get there in a second.
And then the third step is it's on the ballot, like it is here this November. Mm-hmm. And it has to get more yes votes than no votes. And then it also has to get, you add up all the number of votes for the governor, whether it's for Governor Lee, their opponent, any write-ins, the total number of votes in a governor's race, and you divide that in half, and you add 1 to it. And so for a constitutional amendment to pass, it has to get that 50% plus 1.
Of the electorate of that gubernatorial ballot race.
Yes.
See, I don't know if I knew that last part, because that's an important step. So
yes, it's a pretty high bar.
I'd be curious because I guess it's lower. With the governor part of it, it's a little less than half per se, just because we have these number of independents going, and so it's theoretically you could have we got 8 governors on this ballot or something like that.
I've lost count. So
yeah, we have a number of independents. A couple of them coming out of Knox County as well. I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We have 10. So it's
plus all the people that write in your name.
Yeah, right. Well, no, they're supposed to write me in for 18. Not that I have a particular want for 18. It's just I'm actually eligible for it and stuff like that. But yes, you can write in Lord Seth for anything you want to on the ballot, and that'll crack
so they
me up.
Total all that together.
Right. And then, but plus 1. So it's got to be 1 more votes to say yes or no. To say yes, yeah. Above the number of total votes the winning governor gets.
So it's important for people to vote on the constitutional amendments. Because it's, it's just they've got to get enough votes, whether you want to vote yes
Right.
or no on them. But it is very important to vote on them.
And then so if it doesn't hit that standard, it's assumed no. Okay.
It doesn't pass.
Right, and so if I will just throw in making numbers up, I'm sure somebody out there, Chris Davis, could probably correct me on the history of it. But if in the state of Tennessee, just for simple math, 1 million people vote in the governor's race, 500,001 have to vote. If 500,000 vote for, we'll say Constance because she's one of the local ones, and Constance wins the race at a complete perfect 50%. 500,001 have to say yes to change the constitutional item.
Yes, and it doesn't matter who they vote for governor,
Right.
but it's
whoever
it's
wins the governor race,
501,000 have to vote for that constitutional amendment. Vote yes for it to
one
pass.
more than whoever the total the winner gets for governor. I think I get it.
So if you had 100 people that vote totally for
Easier
governor,
numbers.
then you need 51.
Right. Okay. I think I get it.
Okay.
All right.
So now we've got the baseline there.
Right, and so we get down to the brass tacks of the four that we have. Number 4, as it reads, Chris Davis, and if anybody wants it, it's on the Knox County Election Commission website, which there's a link on our website to that as well. But number 4, as it's going to read to everybody on their ballot, and we're going to go backwards because for the audience sake, I think number 1's the one that has the most discussion to it. I think it's the most complicated one for sure, as far as the different moving parts and pieces of it. So we're going backwards for everybody listening as well. So number 4 is, this is how it reads. This amendment would delete Article 9, Section 1 of the Tennessee Constitution, which prohibits ministers of the gospel and priests of any denomination from holding a seat in either house of the legislature. And then the question is, shall Article 9, Section 1 of the Constitution of Tennessee be amended by deleting that section? Seems pretty straightforward to me. The yes or no here is if you are if you are the priest of a chapel under current Tennessee Constitution, you are not allowed to hold legislative office.
Well, I tell you, there's a little bit of history there. That's been ruled unconstitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court.
Okay.
So it's kind of null in there anyway.
Right.
And there have been ministers once the Supreme Court ruled it unconstitutional.
Okay. So for the
it's
sake
basically this is cleaning it up to get it in line with federal law.
Right. And so for the sake of... Okay, so let's go back to a little bit of the structure conversation. When, let's say for number 4, for example, it gets the required numbers of yeses to pass, when does it actually take effect?
I think basically immediately.
Okay. And so, I mean, it would be too late for anybody running for this cycle anyway, obviously, but so on November 8th, we all say yes because so then on 9th, when it takes physical effect inside the state, nothing functionally changes because it's already federally unconstitutional to prohibit somebody because of their faith profession.
Correct.
From holding office. So,
correct.
So for the lack of a better term, is it's getting the state constitution caught up with the federal constitution, but functionally no change on the other side.
Correct.
Okay, number 4, check. That one was easy. Number 3, moving on. This is the weird slavery one that I was really confused on. This amendment would change the current language in Article 1, Section 33 of the Tennessee Constitution, which says that slavery and involuntary servitude, except for punishment for a person who has been duly convicted of a crime, are forever prohibited in this state. The amendment would delete the current language and replace it with the following language, quote, slavery and involuntary servitude are forever prohibited. Nothing in this section shall prohibit an inmate from working when the inmate has been duly convicted of a crime, close quote. Question. Shall Article 1, Section 33 of the Constitution of Tennessee be amended by deleting the section and substituting instead the following? Section 33, slavery and involuntary servitude are forever prohibited. Nothing in this section shall prohibit an inmate from working when the inmate has been duly convicted of a crime. Okay, so yes, we want to change the language, or no, we want to leave it the way it is. That is the simple answer. But the functional, what does that change in the state as far as whether our prison system works?
Basically, it's removing the exception. So they can still work and get paid for their work while in prison.
Okay.
But they can't it's not basically what it was saying is that if you were a prisoner someone being incarcerated at this point, you could be a slave or be
Right.
forced to involuntary servitude.
You could be made to do work.
Yes.
That is of value to somebody else for no pay.
You could be in essence a slave,
Okay,
or be subject to involuntary servitude. Now we're saying no, you can work,
Right.
but you're not going to be a slave. So slave, you're forced to work,
Right.
and work, you choose to work.
So it would be involuntary, or it would be voluntary in the sense of I got a DUI and I chose to do
Clean up litter on the side,
instead
yes.
of
Yes.
serving time or something like. But I'm volunteering to do the work,
Correct.
in lieu of some value, whether it's pay an amount of fine, a certain number of days in jail. I can instead do some community service, but that's a choice. Bringing in the voluntary part,
and it's removing the exception,
right.
and that's the main thing that is doing. There is a large group that is working on this particular. There's two amendments that basically have groups that are working. Well, that have groups working on them and have been raising money to raise awareness. And then there's two that don't.
Right. This one seems, I don't know, maybe there's some deep, dark something in the corner that I don't get, but this one seems pretty straightforward to me.
I think it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, it feels to be like this, that the fact that the exception was ever put in the first place is more problematic than anything. Like, I get it. Like, I understand it from some people's point of view that is part of the punishment per se. But I don't like the idea of involuntary servitude of any type. All right, well, we're going too fast. We need to slow down.
You don't necessarily have to read all of mine.
It is a big one. So this one is yours, and we've talked about it on previous times you're in here, and I'm very excited as you were going through the process that I got to go through the process with you, and you got to explain it to me, and I saw it, and I saw it when it was on the floor, and I was like, hey, that's the one that she was talking about. Because I think this one, without reading the I mean, it's going to be a full page of your ballot. Everybody is just
Yes.
this one. Essentially, the state in the Constitution has a setup for if the governor is just a simple like surgery procedure for the day. There's a handoff process because he's out or whatever, and if he actually gets killed or something like that, there is a transfer of power process. But we don't have a process if currently Governor Lee was to get very ill and be incapable of doing the job, but not necessarily for a long term and being unclear in that weird middle area. Is that a decent layman's version?
Basically, you don't really need a handoff for short-term surgery necessarily, but there is it in there if the governor should happen to pass away, it goes to the line of succession goes first to the Speaker of the Senate, who is also our lieutenant governor. And if they are not able to take the position, then it goes to the Speaker of the House. So in looking at this, and this actually was brought to me originally back in 2014 by a college student that had been involved in the Tennessee Intercollegiate Scholastic Legislature. And we are the only state that doesn't have something, a process in place, procedure in place, if our governor became temporarily incapacitated or a temporary disability.
Give me the definition of what the state is going to consider a temporary incapacitation.
Well, let's say I used to use the scenario when Governor Haslam was there. If he was out riding a bicycle, he was hit, he was in a short-term coma. We don't know how long the coma was going to be, so we needed to make sure that the functions of government was continuing until we saw. There was a case, one of the cases that some of us older folks would remember was back when Governor Wallace was shot, back in the 60s, I believe. And until he was able to get out of his surgery, get out off
So an
of the
attempted
anesthesia.
assassination failure, but he still got hurt and he was still out in recovery.
And then there's most recently the Indiana governor, Frank O'Bannon, had a massive stroke and his office was temporarily assumed. He did die, but so then at that point the succession for the line of death. But the temporary incapacitation has really only been used a couple of times in the country.
Right.
It was thought that might be needed in Tennessee a number of years ago when Governor Bredesen had a tick bite. and it was pretty serious. But it's it can be, the governor may know in advance that they're going to be going under surgery, and they'll be under anesthesia for a long time or for a period of time, and they can relinquish the duties ahead of time. I mean, put it in writing to the Secretary of State and to the two speakers that they're going to be temporarily incapacitated. There could be an accident that then there's a system in place, and that's part of all the writing.
Right.
But it goes through, all the administrative commissioners of the departments, and they let the Secretary of State and the two speakers know if it's something that's not planned. Also, if you had somebody that was I guess earlier on when Governor Blanton was in, if the selling pardons happened sooner in his reign, in his tenure in office, they could have felt there could have been a mental illness or something. So there is a possibility that's probably the least possible scenario, basically.
To me, that would be my concern in the bigger picture of it, is that it becomes a political tool to say, I don't know, the party that's not in power as the governorship brings question to their mental fortitude, for lack of a better word, and tries to use this as a tool to take out a governor for a period of time.
It's a pretty high bar. Plus, when you're putting that in the hands of the administrative commissioners of all the departments, they're actually the governor's people. The governor appointed them. So they're not going to take that lightly.
Right.
And so it really is just really in place for the rare circumstances. I remember the story goes that when President Reagan was in office, that he wouldn't even take anesthesia for a colonoscopy because he didn't want to relinquish the duties.
Right.
So, I mean, obviously there's...
And then he got shot at some point, too.
Yes. So it's just something that we need to do. I actually started this in 2014, and the first couple of years that we tried it, the two speakers couldn't agree quite upon the language. And so it took us a while, but we passed it in 19 and then in 21, so the 2 different years. But it passed unanimously by both houses. So it was well above my 2/3 majority type thing. So I'm going to be a little frustrated if it doesn't get enough votes, because I don't have a big money machine behind it. So everybody that's listening, I'm going to deputize you to help me find at least 10 people to go vote for Amendment 2.
I can see how that, as far as the numbers turn out and stuff like that. And I am the type, if like it doesn't matter, I'm not in, let's say, I'm not in District 16, but if I were in District 16, I'm not going to vote for that House race because it's just Michelle Carringer. There's nobody against it. And so I'm very much the type that if it doesn't do anything, I just skip it. But with the format and function of this, it actually matters a little bit more. So I won't be skipping these. And I encourage everybody else. And that's why I wanted to do the show, because I think very specifically, I think yours specifically, since it is so massively wordy, it's going to be one where I'm just going to skip this whole page and let me move on to this other stuff. I'm not going to understand it. It's all legal speak, which it's not too bad. I read it before we started, but it is very wordy. But don't skip it. Just say yes.
Well, I think it's just important because it would be such a serious thing if the governor was temporarily incapacitated, that the procedure is got to be very explicit.
Right.
And I think that's where all the words come from.
Right.
If I was writing it, I mean, even though it was my bill, we had, a lot of people work together on it. But if I was writing it, I would have it much simpler on the ballot.
Would you like a system to be in place in case the governor gets hurt and can't work for a few weeks?
Yes. Or
yes or no?
Temporarily. I just tell people it's a temporary incapacitation.
I mean, incapacitation is too many syllables when it gets down to it.
Temporary disability of the government, of the governor, and we're the only state that doesn't have it.
Yeah, just somewhere. Yeah, and I think I acknowledge it. I think it's an appropriate thing to have in place. Like I said, and I think you put my one kind of concern about it at ease, because it would have to be real, real bad for the governor's appointed staffs and stuff like that to be like, you know what, just for political purposes, we're going to toss them out of here on this this part of this constitutional amendment or whatever. All right, so number one, which I think is the big one, there's, like you said earlier, there's a significant amount of money rolling around of people pushing for and against amendment number one. There's been a billboard downtown for, I mean, it was midsummer. It was in there. It's like, I called Chris Davis. I was like, they're not doing a ballot item on this August election, are they? I thought that wasn't how it worked. He's like, no, they have to be in November. But they were starting early on this one. So, constitutional amendment number one. Summary: this amendment would add a new section to Article 9 of the Tennessee Constitution to make it illegal for any person, corporation, association, or the state of Tennessee or its political subdivisions to deny or attempt to deny employment to any person because of the person's membership in, affiliation with, resignation from, or refusal to join or affiliate with any labor union or employee organization. Question: shall Article 11, of the Constitution of Tennessee be amended by adding the following language as a new section? It is unlawful for any person, corporation, association, or this state or its political subdivisions to deny or attempt to deny employment to any person by reason of the person's membership in, affiliation with, resignation from, or refusal to join or affiliate with any labor union or employee organization. So, right off the bat, my first question on this is, as the state of Tennessee sits currently, if I were to take a job at, let's say, Starbucks on Merchant, since they're one of the ones in the big national conversation about the Starbucks being unionized. So as it stands currently in the state of Tennessee, if I were to take that job, even though it has become a union shop, Starbucks cannot refuse to hire me because I don't want to join the union that's there, or vice versa.
Correct.
Okay. So, so the basic.
Let me just restate very simply, just because we're kind of beating around. Basically, right to work law simply means you cannot be forced to join a union or pay union dues in order to get or keep your job, but you can choose to join that union. So it's a personal choice. It's not being arm twisted. It's not being, denied or fired or hired because of your decision on that.
Right.
That is currently in state law.
Right.
But the legislature can change. There could be things done elsewhere. But so this would enshrine it basically in our state constitution.
Right. We were talking about this a couple weeks ago on the big show, and Sam was having a really hard time understanding it because essentially, again, one of the questions I was asking earlier, so or November 9th, the day after, when this, if this gets yesed, on November 9th, the day after, if the yes to the amendment goes through, nothing changes.
Nothing changes.
And my layman's version of it, when I was trying to explain to him, is like it changes the altitude of where it sits in state law. So right now, it is just a regular. All the different parts and pieces of what's in here are probably scattered on a couple of different laws over the last 50 years or whatever. But it condenses the union specific parts of this into one place, and it moves it up into a constitutional thing. Which, as we were talking about at the beginning of the show, in the process, if legislation changes, if the House and Senate change majority bodies and stuff like that, and over the next couple of years, and that new body wants to change this, it now becomes that minimum of 2 years, if you really, really, really squeeze it in, to probably 6 or 8 year process to try to take this out of the Constitution. So, and this is not
minimum of 3.
Minimum of 3. Sorry, yeah, because it's 2. Right, yeah.
Last year of the first 2 years, and it could be either.
And then the governor, right? If you line it up perfectly with the governor election on the end of the second session version of it, and so to me, I guess my concern with this one to me is that so maybe it's 5 years, maybe it's a decade, maybe it's 15 years from now, but some of the state's feelings on labor law changes. And we start electing people to change said labor law, and then they get there, and then it's going to take them a massive amount of time to get some of these changes made legally because it's a constitutional item now.
Well, that's true, but it's not going to go in the Constitution unless Tennesseans don't want it. And it wouldn't come out of the Constitution unless Tennesseans want it out, regardless of who's in the legislature. So it is, at the end of the day, this is a vote of the citizens of Tennessee. And, it's really more about freedom of choice and freedom of expression to be able to be able to go find a job where you want to and not be tied into that.
Right. So, okay. So does it, I mean, I'm assuming the way the state of Tennessee works, that's not an actionable, currently it's not an actionable, like, if you came to my office and asked me for a job, you wanted to work here in the studio with me or whatever, and I said, no, you're in a union or you want to start a union in my place or whatever like that. That, and I say that to you, is that is that something that would be a semi-protected class, like race, religion, kind of stuff like that, where you could bring suit against me for denying your employment?
No, I think it's more if you're denying somebody an employment because they don't want to be in a union.
Right. Well, I mean, the way it reads, I think, is either way. But and again, I didn't want to put you in a union. There's the only reason I put the example that way. So, okay, so flip it over. So I want to come work for you, and you have a union shop already in place because the union, National Labor Board came in and did their whole thing. And it's like, I want to work for you, but I don't want to join the union.
You could file a complaint.
I could file a complaint in the current standard, and even after this, theoretically.
Theoretically,
so
yeah, I mean, you still could. I mean, even the state law is not going to change. It's just putting it in the Constitution. So,
but is that grounds for a employment lawsuit? Like, as far as it has nothing to do with my work ethic or my workability or anything like that. It's just because I don't want this other thing. Correct.
You could file an employment complaint, and there's several different methods to file employment complaints, and I'm not as up to date on all those. But you could take action if somebody denied you the right to work there because you refused to join the union.
Okay.
Yes.
But that, again, that doesn't change this on the other side. That's just one of the little sub-specifics that's at play that was floating around my head.
And if it overwhelmingly got no votes, it still doesn't change it.
Right.
But it would send a message, but it doesn't change it.
Right. If you're paying attention, it's not right. It's not functionally changing anything, but it's certainly going to change some things that go on here in January for people to try to keep their jobs in the future election cycles and stuff like that. Because again, I don't know. I have a very complicated relationship with unions personally, as far as trying to understand the value to them for the employer, the employees, the community at large, and stuff like that. But I think I don't know. I struggle with this one just because of the timing thing. To me, it feels like one day the Republicans know they're not going to hold the House or the Senate, and when that day comes, if that new class of Democrats or some crazy third party, because I'm a third party guy anyway, some crazy third party comes in and takes over Tennessee government, that it's going to make it a big, long process for them to get out of some of these, any constitutional item, obviously, but this one specifically, just because it seems to be more of a simple party line in the current format.
But truthfully, I think it's still, to force somebody into a union, to me, it just doesn't sit right. I mean, now there's a lot of people that are trying to confuse this with employment at will, which Tennessee is, and that's just in state law. And basically that means somebody could be fired for any reason,
right.
And so they're saying that if this passes, that means they can fire you for any reason. That's in state law. Well, no, that's not true. That will not, that's not putting employment at will into...
okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so some of it
could take a specific complainable thing out of an at-will conversation, but it's not putting at will as the long term.
All it's doing, like say, is saying you don't have to join a union if you don't want to. It can't be a condition of employment.
Right.
And so it really is fairly simple. It really shouldn't make any difference for, if organizations or businesses wanted to unionize, if they have the right thing in place and they sell their employees on it. But they've got to, say this is a good thing for us.
But I think the fear is you take a shop again. We'll just stick on. We'll keep picking on Starbucks for now. It's young and whatever right now in the union process, but say 10 years down the road, it's been a union shop for a long time. And, a company like Starbucks, who at least from national conversation about it, doesn't seem too keen on going unionized in all their stores, they just start hiring people who don't want to be part of the union. And then at some point, the union could still exist. It's just not there because none of the employees work there anymore.
But it does protect union members that want to be members of union, that so they wouldn't be fired because they're a member of the union.
Yeah.
So it really protects both sides of the equation. And
so hold on real quick. So in the state of Tennessee, if I decided to form a union at my employers and started agitating for and organizing and doing all that kind of stuff, if my employer fired me because I'm trying to start a union there, that is actionable? That's federally actionable.
Yeah, I mean,
right.
It would be under that. But I'm just saying, if you were a member of a union,
right,
they couldn't fire you just because you're a member of a union. Now, if you were a lousy employee, maybe.
Right.
But,
well, it goes back to the standard. To me, the right to work, the lazy way to explain right to work is just don't tell them why you fired them, and then you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. I mean, I still think, as someone that ran a nonprofit here when I was at Sir Thomas Center, even though it's an employee at will state, we let our employees know why they were being fired. Right. If they were being fired. And they pretty well knew anyway before we even got to that point. But, I mean, almost every industry is having trouble finding employees right now. Right. So we don't need to put restrictions, and this really frees up the restrictions, actually. It makes it almost neutral. And when it really, at the end of the day, your right to work states, the statistics from those states, there are in-migration states. They have, lower individual tax burdens. Right,
because there's no argument. I was going to ask you that question when we got off, when we finished this, and just a couple of off-topic questions before we call it a day is there info from the state on how many people are moving to Tennessee and then subsections of Tennessee? Because I will argue that the census is way short. Just because of the timing with the pandemic and all the craziness of the census, that I think the census is way short of what was already happening. And I think we've blown up past that. Are there any numbers? Is there anybody talking about how many more people are continuing to move in?
I don't have those in front of me, but they are definitely,
because I don't want to go near national.
No. Most of the people are moving to Middle Tennessee area. We're getting enough growth in Knoxville. I think it's about 16%. Rutherford County, I think, is growing by about 50%.
Oh, that's Murfreesboro, right?
Yes, yeah. Murfreesboro. Yeah. But it's that increases our tax base. It increases. I mean, it puts stress on our infrastructure, but it does increase our tax base. So we've actually been able to give back to Tennesseans in the last 11 years $2 billion in tax decreases. That's because we're growing our economy and we're moving all those people to Middle Tennessee.
That's good. If that's the continuation of the combo, I'm good with that. Because right, and then we can make even more money and give even more money back when we get some sort of legal weed in this state. I know where you stand on it. We've talked about it before.
Yeah, parts of it. I'm good with medical cannabis, so I'm there.
I get it.
So that's halfway there.
That's further than where we are.
I almost had it passed 2 years ago.
Well, I mean, that's what's so weird about this whole thing. Is so.
Actually, I had it passed in the Senate. We just hadn't had a floor vote on it. But
we had it was I don't remember the Senate number, but it was House 1957, I think it was.
I never remember. I don't even remember my own bill numbers.
Well, it was one as a constituent. And this frustrates me, and I don't know if this is something that you need to pass law on or not on the way they do it. I don't like these placeholder bills. I don't like the premise of it. I don't necessarily understand why you have to have everything presented day one and then adjust as time goes. Why couldn't middle of February be like, hey, this became an issue. I want to add this to the calendar. I guess maybe so that we don't have 10 million things added to the calendar over the year. But this placeholder bill talks about a date change for the Department of Health to submit some paperwork. And then on the other end of it, it's a full ban on any hemp or CBD products in the state. Yeah. By the time I got to one of its subcommittees or something like that. Drives me crazy because I want to understand what's going on, and it's hard. Right. It's really hard. So quick review, just make sure we got this right. One is the right to work thing.
And 27 states are right to work states.
27 states are right to work states. And so yes is going to... Again, it doesn't change anything, so come November 9th, it's not going to be some whole different change in how you interact with your employer. It just makes it so that it's again, like my analogy for it is it raises it up in the altitude of law in the state of Tennessee and makes it harder to change in the future. Number 2 is Becky's, what do we do if the governor is temporarily incapacitated? We do what was obvious to do. We just now have it structured in writing. So, because we're one of the only states, I would say?
The only state that doesn't have the procedure in place.
So this just clears up that procedure. So that's that one. Number 3 is any sort of slavery or involuntary servitude is now and forever prohibited in the state. And then number 4 is correction to get us up to date with federal with federal constitutional rights of people who want to hold office.
Regarding ministers and priests, and
because that was a weird one. We went and were reading the state constitution about it, because somewhere in there very clearly it states that it is against the law for the state to administer a test of faith or something like that for anybody seeking office. But then either before that or after that, as we're reading through it, it says you can't hold office for a priest or minister. It's like, well, you can't ask, at least according to that other one. Yeah. And so, again, it's a cleanup thing, I think, if nothing else.
So, and to be perfectly transparent, I'm voting yes on all 4.
Okay.
So, just I think they're all good.
I've got to put some more thought into one. Like I said,
it's fine.
It's a big and a complicated one. I think I absolutely think number 3 is important. I think that's tip top of the list.
I hope you think number 2 is important.
Any version of it, any version of slavery and involuntary servitude is other than parents to their kids. There's no other. There's no other. That's the only exception to any sort of slavery that there should be. Yeah, I think number 2 is important too, just to get it on the books. I mean, number 4, I don't know. I get it. I will probably vote yes for it, just because it's just a cleaning up of the books long term. But yeah, I think I agree. I think number 2 is important to have that clearly defined. Hopefully, never need it, but when we do, it's there. But yeah, I think number 1 is the one to talk about. I think number 1 is the most impactful, but not really. Again, like, it's not going to whatever day it officially takes effect. If that is November 9th, nothing. The ground's not going to come swallow people up that want to be in unions or anything like that. It's everything more or less stays the same. It's just the longer term that we as Tennesseans are so passionate about this, that this needs to be something that stays and sticks around for a long time.
Correct.
Cool. All right.
You want the dates on? You have to register by October 11th.
October 11th. I said 10. I was close.
You're close. Early voting is October 19th through November 3rd. Okay. And Election Day is November 8th.
November 8th. That's Tuesday. And
you can register online. You can go, if you go to the Secretary of State's site, which is tn.gov/SOS. There's links there to vote, register.
Yeah, and you can get that through Knox County Election Commission too. They'll link you through all that too.
That's knoxvotes.org.
Yeah, and so just for everybody's sake, because it's not the first Tuesday, it's the first Tuesday after the first Monday.
Correct.
Is Election Day, and that's why it's going to be on the second Tuesday, because November 1st is a Tuesday.
This is the latest it can ever be.
Yeah, it's it is. Yeah. Because there's no other way to do it, because the first is a Tuesday. But it has to be after the first Monday, so that 7th is the first Monday, so the day after. All right, that was quick. I figured we'd spend hours on this, but oh well. Anything else going on that we need to know about?
No, just been a busy year. I'm chairing transportation and safety, so I'm looking forward to working. We have Commissioner Butch Ely is our new commissioner, who was commissioner of Finance and Administration, and I know one of the governor's prime initiatives the next 4 years, if he's fortunate enough to be reelected, which he's the odds-on favorite, but is going to be infrastructure in the state. So as chairing transportation and as having the traffic woes that we do here in Knoxville, I'm looking forward to seeing how we can kind of get ahead. But the other thing that's going to be the most impactful is over the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to have to figure out how We're going to fund our roads as cars are moving to the CAFE standards of 60 miles per gallon, and as more and more people get electric vehicles.
Right, because a good chunk of that is coming out of gas tax.
And the other part of that is about 30 to 40% of our gas tax revenue comes from out-of-state people who are tearing up our roads. And so we're going to have, a lot of states are going to a form of a miles driven type thing. You could either do a registration. They give options a lot of times, a registration fee versus, monitoring your miles driven. I'm participating in a pilot project right now with 2 other states that I've got to plug in my car. Mm-hmm. But so if somebody doesn't drive very much, they're better off doing some form of monitoring their miles driven.
Right. Well, because my day job, I do like 100 miles a day in my day job, and so
if you're driving a lot, you're better off paying that average fee. Huh. And so we'll be looking at that, because it's hard to maintain and also expand our roads for the growth in Tennessee. And our problem in Knoxville is we have 2, if not even really 3 major interstates that converge through our town. We have 4 of the highest traffic counts in the state in Knox County, and our truck weigh station is the busiest in the country.
I don't doubt that for a second.
So we've got.
Well, so wouldn't that be one of the solutions to get less people on the roads?
Well,
is there any conversation about mass transit?
But the East Coast is growing so fast. It's it's like anything. There's never one solution.
Right.
You've got to do alternatives and tools in the tool belt. One of the things that I would like, and we tried to do it 20 years ago, is get a bypass in Knoxville. The bypass we talked about 20 years ago was too close in. I believe that we need a half a bypass, and the first leg that I would do would be from 75 to 40, and then maybe 40 to 75 or 81 to 75. So from 81 to 75, further up outside of Knox County, and get that truck traffic off of the middle part of our roads. And I said we can't traffic calm our way around it, and I think it's something that long term we're going to need. So I know it would take a long time to get that done, and I probably won't still be driving by the time it would get done. But
your car will drive you by then.
So yes, that's true. But my goal is, I feel like we've got to get something like that back on, at least on the list. Because if it's not on the list, it doesn't move up.
Right, I understand.
So that's one of the big things that I'm going to be continuing to work on and to advocate for the better roads and expansion of roads to keep up with our growth of our state and actually the East Coast.
I'm curious, we've got this infrastructure bill and all the money that's going on with that, how we're going to go out about spending all that here in the next year or two.
All that?
I don't know how much it is. It's more than zero.
Well, let's put it this way. 2 things. I
just got laughed at, everybody. She just laughed at me on my show.
Two things that the infrastructure bill did. One, it was a 5-year plan instead of a 1-year plan that we had every year. Okay, so it gave a little bit of certainty. But the amount of increase it gave was only for roads. Now, there was a few other sundry things in there, but for roads. So Washington makes you think, oh boy, we're going to get all this new money. And great, I can do it from the roads, and that comes under my committee.
Right.
Great. And then you start drilling down on it. It was about $45 to $50 million a year per region, which is next to nothing.
Yeah,
it's no major road project. And by the time you filter in the inflation and the increased cost of building roads right now, it's probably nothing.
Right.
It's negligible, and at the end of the day, we're not turning down extra money, but it's still not near what the hype was over it.
Right. I follow.
That's why I was laughing.
It's fair. I get it. I get it. I know I don't understand these things, and most people don't either. And I think that's normal, and I think that's one of the problems. That's why I wanted to do these are the 4 ballot items, and this is somebody who actually knows what we're talking about. All right, well, I'm going to do an outro, and we're going to call it a day.
Okay. You're my first one I've done, too, so thank you.
Senator Becky Massey, everybody. She came in. She told us about things She helped us understand what these 4 ballot items are. Like I said, my number one cheat, the easiest thing, the most important thing to remember me is, yes, it's a change. No, it stays the way it is. That's the lazy version. And then the details from there. We're Almost Agreement at gmail.com. Find us on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube. Go to our website, almostagreement.com. It's got my Election Guide 22. Election Guide 22 is going to have a link to this show, other shows with candidates that are coming up in this November election, as well as links to KGIS and Knox County Election Commission. You can go those places, check your registration, October 11th, as we discussed. Make sure you're registered. Make sure you know where your polling place is. Make sure you know what districts you're in so you actually know who you're actually voting for. This November ballot is really, really light, especially compared to that August one we just did. So you should be in and out pretty quick, even though you have to read a couple pages of ballot questions. But we're going to work through those, and we've got a cheat sheet. So you just go in knowing what you're going to do, and then you don't have to do all that reading. So we're Almost Agreement. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Give us a like, share, tell your friends about us. And we'll be back tomorrow with some more.